Okay, I think we're live. Yeah, okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm well. I'm well. I am. I am looking forward to hearing from you. My favorite Shelley poem, since we had decided, yeah, that we would start our sessions with some poetry, or at least today.
Yeah, no, I was glad we kind of set this up as the opening or the way to start. Because I personally I did not have a lot of experience reciting poetry. I've been much more into like prose or theoretical literature, and I always found, especially like just the reading of poetry, couldn't access it in a certain way.
Mm.
And like hopefully after we read when we get into the article we're looking to discuss today, it's actually been helpful to me to interact with some of the feelings I had toward my reception to poetry, like from youth until now. And I think some problems that we still see, especially in its academic teaching, along those lines. But
Oh yeah. Oh my
uh,
God. Hold on for a second while I get our link and I put it into the I guess Twitch and I put it into the Discord. Let's let those guys know. Okay. What do you mean in terms of the ways that poetry has been mistaught?
well, one thing I can think of in particular, which came to mind when reading this article, was um, I forget what poem exactly, but there is a certain poem that was part of the SATs, the standard test
Oh yeah.
going to college, and it's in the reading comprehension section.
Mm-hmm.
And it got very literal with like, okay, so the author by this means this sort of thing, sort of the understanding of it. It seemed to give a like direct kind of glossary for the interpretation of the poem. I
Mm-hmm.
remember even thinking like, well, I didn't get that exactly, so I must not be good at poetry or something like that. But so the way that I think it starts off with a slight invective against didactic or moral poetry
Mm-hmm.
that Larouche sees
Oh
himself as
yes.
being a compatriot of Poe and being against very strongly. And then the theory of poetry sort of developed throughout the article is this where the effect of poetry is a preconscious effect. And the way that he's using it is within certain studies of Freud that turned into critical studies. So it's working with that sort of system of mind, at least in its terminology, but that the effect of the poem to actually be a poem cannot be one of like a direct literal understanding. Like it has to sort of bypass this sort of conscious literal understanding to actually have effect on the development of the preconscious of the individual, which is necessary to develop in order to become a self-conscious individual.
I I agree that that is what's. I mean, let's not talk about it right now. Let's
Yeah, for sure.
let's
Sorry.
read. Let's do the poetry and then we'll talk about it.
Yep.
So please take the
All right.
stage.
So I'll start out with this is "Hymn to Intellectual Beauty" by Percy. I never know how to say his middle name. If you do,
Bish.
Percy Bysshe Shelley. Here. The awful shadow of some unseen power floats, though
Bish.
unseen among us, visiting this various world with as inconstant wing, as summer winds that creep from flower to flower, like moonbeams that behind some piney mountain shower it visits with inconstant glance each human heart and countenance, like hues and harmonies of evening, like clouds and starlight widely spread, like memory of music fled, like aught that for its grace may be dear, and yet dearer for its mystery. Spirit of beauty that dost consecrate with thine own hues all thou dost shine upon of human thought or form, where art thou gone? Why dost thou pass away and leave our state, this dim vast vale of tears vacant and desolate? Ask why the sunlight not forever weaves rainbows o'er yon mountain river, why aught should fail and fade that once is shown, why fear and dream and death and birth cast on the daylight of this earth such gloom, why man has such a scope for love and hate, despondency and hope. No voice from some sublimer world hath ever to sage or poet these responses given. Therefore the names of demon, ghost, and heaven remain the records of their vain endeavor, veil spells whose uttered charm might not avail to sever from all we hear and all we see, doubt, chance, and mutability. Thy light alone like mist o'er mountains driven, or music by the night wind sent, through strings of some still instrument, or moonlight on a midnight stream, gives grace and truth to life's unquiet dream. Love, hope, and self-esteem like clouds depart, and come for some uncertain moments lent. Man were immortal and omnipotent. Didst thou, unknown and awful as thou art, keep with thy glorious train firm state within his heart, thou messenger of sympathies, that wax and wane in lovers' eyes, thou that to human thought art nourishment, like darkness to a dying flame, depart not as thy shadow came, depart not, lest the grave should be, like life and fear, a dark reality. While yet a boy I sought for ghosts and sped through many a listening chamber, cave and ruin, and star-like wood with fearful steps pursuing, hopes of high talk with the departed dead. I called on poisonous names with which our youth is fed. I was not heard, I saw them not, when musing deeply on the lot of life, at that sweet time when winds are wooing, all vital things that wake to bring news of birds and blossoming. Sudden thy shadow fell on me, I shrieked and clasped my hands in ecstasy. I vowed that I would dedicate my powers to thee and thine, have I not kept the vow? With beating heart and streaming eyes even now, I call the phantoms of 1,000 hours, each from his voiceless grave they have envisioned bowers of studious zeal or love's delight. Outwatched with me the envious night, they know that never joy illumed my brow, unlinked with hope that thou wouldst free this world from its dark slavery, that thou, O awful loveliness, wouldst give whate'er these words cannot express. The day becomes more solemn and serene when noon is past. There is harmony in autumn and a luster in its sky, which through the summer is not heard or seen, as if it could not be, as if it had not been. Thus let thy power, which like the truth of nature on my passive youth, descended to my onward life supply its calm, to one who worships thee, and every form containing thee, whom spirit fair thy spells did bind to fear himself and love all humankind. So one comment I'd just like to add here is I think anybody listening can plainly see the sort of aesthetic difference in my diction in like my first, textual like introduction
Yeah.
through his article compared to reading the poem itself. I don't have much experience with it, but going into it, and I apologize for parts of it or whatever. You can feel that difference in your aesthetic self-representation when you like give yourself over into that kind of reading, as opposed to, though I think there's a lot gotten out of live readings with theoretical texts and prose and that sort of thing. There's a very distinct difference in aesthetic that was surprising to myself going through this. So I'm very grateful for this exercise. I would hope and suggest that maybe we come back to this as well.
Oh my God! Yeah. I mean, this poem in particular has so much that one can do with it. I mean, this reading made me think again of Unlearned Ignorance, because this idea of intellectual beauty, as opposed to beauty, you have intellectual beauty, and surely that is which is prior. I find that stanza on his childhood exploring, his efforts to understand what is that pre-conscious intellectual beauty. I find that so evocative, and the feeling that the desire to have that continue in the later part of your life as you have calm or gain calm from it. I think that's very. It strikes me differently now at age 35 than it did at age 25.
But I also appreciated the sections going over the almost like the phantasm of intellectual beauty, or the false names maybe given to them in the coming to understanding of it. So those earlier passages, or those times earlier in his life where he's attempting to speak with ghosts or having seances in order to, it seems like, imbue the sublime in a certain way into himself. I can, with various different,
Yeah.
technically aesthetic experiences in my own use, I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I will,
Yes, please, yeah. So you had, I think, Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn.
oh, the most important, in my view, um, for our study of poetry. Okay, oh, pardon me while I bring it up. Okay. Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities, or mortals, or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loth? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but, more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal yet, do not grieve. She cannot fade. Though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu, and happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? And, little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain, in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty, That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. It's actually, I mean, these lines get to the heart of the sort of Platonic thesis of knowledge, of hypothesis. I mean, the idea that there is an exemplar, that there is that truth itself, or being, from which what we see as the principles which govern the universal gravitation, for example, are an unfolding characteristic of that. And that this is done, if you look at Kepler, which at some point we're really going to have to do very seriously, with my friend Hans, for sure, with Hans, but possibly
Brian
Lizzie.
seems like he's had a lot of experience with Kepler too.
Oh, good. Yes, absolutely. But, Kepler's... I think what we're going to find as we go very thoroughly through the Timaeus, what you will find is the consonance with Kepler. That Kepler was really working off of the Timaeus. He was asking the question, if God, who is most beautiful, who is beauty and truth itself, so to speak, although that's a complex question, so I don't mean to overstate that, but if God, who is the source, at least I can say that for sure, of beauty, if he were to organize the universe, how would he do it in the way that is most beautiful? What would be the most beautiful expression of that capability? And indeed, that is the way that the universe works. That's actually, Kepler's method of investigation, which was explicitly anti-Aristotelian, and sought out the unheard melodies, worked. It successfully forecast, the motion of the heavenly bodies, unlike anything else. So.
And I think you see them both in Kepler's work there, and in these concluding lines of Keith. If you're keeping score at home, a very anti-Kantian interpretation of reality. I was trying to look it up. I think this poem was published 30 years after Kant's Critique of Judgment, where he goes into, from what I think, it's along the same lines, approaching that Platonic triad of the good, the beautiful, and the true, and where Kant attempts to sort of sow impenetrable dividing line between specifically the beautiful and the true, where those are different faculties of judgment, where there's nothing essentially true about a sublime moment of beauty or vice versa, which still kind of grounds, I would say, the majority of the academic, intellectual, and unfortunately a lot of artistic work that I even interact with today.
That is a really significant thing to bring forward. I read this beautiful article by Helga LaRouche on the cult of ugliness, which traced the development of this kind of this belief in the ugly, and the fact that Schiller did everything he could to develop and advance and demonstrate that principle. But that as soon as Moses Mendelssohn died, that was when Kant unleashed his major works and his major attack on this idea that the truth is the true is the beautiful and the good, and that is susceptible to human reason, that it is intelligible, and the means by which mankind becomes able to understand is itself intelligible. And I think, I mean, that is the that's also the way to address. That's the whole secret to economic forecasting, right? Because should you fail to have that knowledge about the nature of the way that man improves his hypotheses to increase his power over nature and thereby to increase the relative potential population density, through the gifts of technology that come from that. Should that be left out, then you remain in a kind of a world without mooring, without any way of willfully acting in the human sense, and therefore, even if you, even though there's a rejection perhaps of the most vile Malthusian outlook on man, there is a blocking from the actual free character of humanity. Anyway, what do you think?
The phrase that comes to mind even is you could talk maybe the popularity of the atonal economics, where it's
what is that?
There's no sense of there being an aesthetic harmony with any sort of economic system, but
Okay.
these purported balancing of the like in Schoenberg's atonal system, it was called something of like a democracy.
Yeah.
The balancing of the 12 tones. It's like, it's just a balance sheet. That's all it is at the end of the day. The IMF putting out loans, and they come with an interest, and
Right.
we're trying to just get it balanced back. We just need to be paying on these loans.
Right.
It really doesn't. We don't care too much about your internal development, even though that's something of a purported mission statement. That at the end of the day, we just need to do what's done in order to get this balance played back. And that's a little bit too simplistic, but just the idea that there's no sense of a harmony being involved, where it's just a kind of computation.
I agree with you. There's no, well, and I mean, there's a question of the harmony of interests, the harmony of, nations' interests. But I think we should stop for a moment, because I think part of what's going on is that we're skipping a ton of frames. This little MacBook is not really happy with the whole project here. And so we may need to just end the stream and start it back up, which would give me with just one, because now we're multi-streaming on 3. Okay, so I'm going to end it, and then we'll get back up on